This is from Al Jazeera. Houthi drone strikes Tel Aviv. How significant is the attack? It's the first time that the Yemeni group are known to have hit Tel Aviv, signaling their growing reach.
Yemen's Houthi group has claimed responsibility for the drone that struck overnight in Tel Aviv, Israel, killing one person and injuring 8. Israel's media identified the dead man as 50-year-old Mr. Furter, who had moved to Israel from Belarus at the beginning of the Russian-Ukraine war. Last night's strike is unique. It's the first time the group is known to have hit Tel Aviv, though the Houthi have waged a continued campaign against targets that claim they're linked to Israel since the ongoing devastating war on Gaza broke out in October. The drone struck in central Tel Aviv in the early hours of Friday morning. The site itself is thought to be close to a number of hotels, many hosting those displaced from Israel's north border with Lebanon. A U.S. Embassy office is also close to the site of the attack. An initial inquiry indicates that the explosion in Tel Aviv was caused by the falling of an aerial target, and no sirens were activated. The incident is under thorough review, the Israeli military said in a statement, attributing its inability to detect the drone to human error rather than a system failure. The Israeli Army spokesman Daniel Hagari said in a video released on Friday evening that the aircraft had hit an apartment building. He said the drone was a Samad 3, an Iranian-manufactured craft that had been modified to extend its range. Iran has not commented on the attack or the Israeli allegation yet. According to Houthi spokesman Sari, According to Houthi spokesman Sari, the aircraft was a new type of drone named Jaffa that was capable of flying undetected through Israel's extensive air defense systems. Despite being just 50 miles from Gaza, Tel Aviv has been almost untouched by the carnage unfolding within the enclave since October. More than 38,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's relentless war on Gaza.
It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it's so much more.
It's funny that they're still claiming the same numbers. It's like watching COVID numbers. Like, at one point they just stall, and then once you end up getting, like, that actual number, it's going to be, like, way worse than you ever imagined.
It's like that report of 186,000 Palestinians have actually died from the conflict.
Not to mention the amount that have died from the extent of the contact. The drone strike within Tel Aviv, the center for much of Israel's diplomatic functions, points to the growing reach of the Houthi arsenal, says analysts. The Houthi group has made extensive use of drones throughout its latest campaign. However, almost all the missiles and drones launched against Israel have been intercepted. None are known to have reached Tel Aviv. The Houthis have claimed many attacks on Israel before, but there's little evidence to indicate most of those came anywhere close to hitting, and certainly not kill and injure like this one, independent Yemen analyst Nick Brumfield told Al Jazeera. Notably, this is the first publicly confirmed Houthi strike in the Mediterranean rather than the Red Sea or Gulf of Aden. Along these vital maritime routes, the Houthi have targeted numerous ships that they say have links to Israel. In addition, they've been claiming strikes on Haifa in cooperation with Iran-backed groups in Iraq. But until now, those mostly seemed like grandstanding, said Brumfield. This is big.
Big PP.
Very big.
Houthis have big PP.
Israel has small PP, that's why it wants to mess with people around it, because it needs to feel like it's big. Houthi drones have also been a frequent target for Western strikes, with the United Kingdom, France, and the United States military all reporting destroying unmanned targets.
I believe last night's attack is part of the Houthi continuous escalation. Mayasa Shujan al-Din of the Yemen-based Sana Center for Strategic Studies said, suggesting that repeat incidents of Houthi drones reaching distant targets was going to become more common. What's interesting is the target and the long range, she told Al Jazeera. I know this is from CNN, but it was the only article at the time that was relevant.
I know a lot of what's going to come through is bullshit with the actual facts, but it's the facts that you can pull out.
It's not bullshit. It's just got so much bias on it. It's going to manufacture some sort of consent.
I guess that's the bullshit part I'm talking about.
We're not trying to manufacture the consent.
Right.
We just want to
be able to quote
certain information.
This is from CNN. Israel strikes Yemen for the first time following deadly Houthi drone attack. Here's what we know. For the first time, Israel has struck inside Yemen, following a deadly drone attack launched by the Houthi rebels on Tel Aviv.
Since the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel, the Houthis have been targeting shipping in the Red Sea in solidarity, they say, with Gaza. But these direct attacks on each other's soil between the Israeli military and an Iranian-backed rebel group risk creating a new front in a conflict that already threatened to spill over into the region. Israel's response came a day later, after the drone attack, when Israel aircraft hit the Yemeni port of Hodeidah. The attack, which marked the first time Israel struck Yemen, killed at least 6 people and injured scores more, Yemeni officials said. The Houthi-ran Al-Mashira TV said the strikes targeted oil facilities in the port on Yemen's west coast. Houthi spokesperson Mohammed Abdusalam said the strikes had also hit civilian targets and a power station. He slammed what he said was a brutal Israeli aggression aimed at increasing the suffering of the people of Yemen and pressuring the group to stop its support of Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the port was used by Iran to bring arms into Yemen. The port we attacked is not an innocent port. It was used for military purposes. It was used as an entry point for deadly weapons supplied to the Houthis by Iran. He's a terrorist. Netanyahu also said the operation, which hit targets over 1,000 miles from Israel's borders, showed Israel was serious about responding to threats. It makes it clear to our enemies that there is no place that the long arm of the state of Israel will not reach, Netanyahu said.
See how he says the long arm? That's that little pee-pee thing.
Israel's small pee-pee.
He's like, I want to make sure you guys know it's long. You know, it's long.
Don't you see how big pee-pee is? No,
come on. You're nothing but a tiny
you're just
fucking
a schoolyard
dead
bully.
Yeah,
schoolyard bully. Neither side has suggested they are ready to back down. It's not in the Houthi DNA to de-escalate with Israel, Charles Lister of the Middle East Institute wrote on X. Houthi army spokesperson Sari said the Houthis have prepared for a long war with Israel and that Tel Aviv is still not safe. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, warned that the blood of Israeli citizens has a price, and that if Israelis are attacked, the result will be identical to which that has been seen in Lebanon and Gaza.
Aww.
What a pussy bitch. What a fucking pussy bitch.
Oh, don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Oh, I'll do what I did to you and did at Gaza. On Sunday, the Israeli military said it had intercepted a missile approaching Israeli territory from Yemen, while the Houthis said they launched a number of ballistic missiles. The war in Gaza has already been accompanied by significantly heightened tensions between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The two sides have been trading cross-border fire since October 8th, when Hezbollah fired at 3 Israeli border posts in solidarity with Palestinians. Any increase in hostilities between Israel and Iran's proxies is seen as deeply destabilizing in the region because it could push the two countries closer towards open warfare. Israel and Iran have already traded one direct exchange since October 7th. Few in the international community want to see it happen again. And since this has been published, the Houthis did fire more missiles, but from the reporting being done, it seems that those were intercepted by the IDF.
I don't support war, period. What's happening is unacceptable, and
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. This is from the Daily Sabah. Pakistan recognizes Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu as terrorist. The Pakistani government has officially decided to recognize Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as a terrorist and has called on the international community to do the same. And I support that decision.
He's a terrorist.
He's a terrorist. Lock him up.
I concur. According to the Dawn newspaper, Pakistan's Prime Minister's advisor, Rana, Information Minister Atullah Tara, and representatives from the TLP party held a joint press conference in the country's capital. Following a week of pro-Gaza demonstrations by TLP, the Pakistani government entered into negotiations with the party. The meeting concluded with both sides reaching an agreement. Under the agreement, the Pakistani government will officially recognize the Israeli Prime Minister as a terrorist and will invite the international community to do the same. Talks between the federal government and TLP representatives began on July 18th. As a result, the government announced it would accelerate its support for the Palestinian victims of Israeli oppression.
I'm glad it's happening, but I do have to say there is a such thing as too little too late. I mean, I'm glad it's happening now, but this should have happened.
Every country should be saying this.
It should have happened months ago.
The agreement was signed. Sanullah praised TLP's efforts for the Palestinian people and announced that the government would send more humanitarian aid to Gaza,
which Israel will not allow in.
Sanullah stated that over 1,000 tons of food and medicine would be sent to Palestine by July 31st. The government also agreed to provide medical aid to the Palestinian people and send healthcare personnel to the region. If the Palestinian government makes the necessary arrangements, injured Palestinians will be brought to Pakistan for treatment, Sanullah said, adding that schools and hospitals in Pakistan are open to provide education and medical facilities to Palestinians. Sanullah defined Israel as a terrorist state and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu as a war criminal under international law. I see no lie. He emphasized that Pakistan will use every possible means to assist Palestinians and condemn Israel.
Please do it.
Demanding Netanyahu's prosecution, Sanullah stated, Netanyahu is a terrorist and a perpetrator of war crimes. He is responsible for the atrocities committed by Israel in Palestine. We call him a terrorist and urge the international community to recognize Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu as a terrorist. We will not only boycott Israel, but also all products associated with Israel and any companies directly or indirectly involved in or aiding this oppression, Sanullah said. He revealed that a committee had been established to identify companies financially supporting Israel's attacks on Gaza and to ban their products.
This is great.
I know, but YouTube's going to ban us.
We're just reading the news.
We're just reading an article, man.
What
No,
do they need?
BDS, there's a lot of anti-BDS in this country. So
BDS.
this is not popular to say.
BDS.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions on Israel is
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what that is. Yeah.
anti-BDS.
Well, every time I hear that, I always think BDSM. I don't know why, but
I do
that's
too.
straight where my brain goes. But I guess it is a type of bondage.
Yes.
Just not the one
Okay.
where we get off.
Sanullah said that the Pakistani government will not use products or services from companies that directly or indirectly assist Israeli forces in committing war crimes against Palestinians. He called on the international community to hold Netanyahu accountable for his actions and deliver him to justice. Based.
This is from The Intercept. The ICJ ruling confirms what Palestinians have been saying for 57 years. Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal, a form of apartheid, and must end, says the UN's High Court at The Hague.
The United Nations top court filed a ruling Friday that echoed what Palestinian advocates have been saying for decades. Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, including its settlements in the West Bank, is illegal and must end. The International Court of Justice's advisory opinion also called for reparations for Palestinians who have lived under Israeli occupation since it began in 1967, an unprecedented step for the court. The court also notably declared Israel's mistreatment of Palestinians to be a form of segregation and apartheid. It further ruled that nations cannot offer aid in support of illegal occupation without violating international law and upheld the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Advisory opinions from the ICJ are not legally binding and cannot in itself force a country to act, but their legal and moral weight can have significant influence on countries' decisions and foreign policy. Jessica Peak, an international law professor at UCLA, said the ruling has the potential to shift the international community's ability to push for Palestinian statehood. She added that the ruling exceeded her expectations, specifically around the issue of Israeli government's systematic abuses toward Palestinians. What was particularly surprising was that they basically made finding that Israel is creating a situation of apartheid against Palestinians within Israel, Peake said, because of the radically discriminatory laws and policies in place that basically treat Palestinians as second-class citizens. But some advocates for Palestinians living within the occupied territories are less enthusiastic about the ruling. Mack, an Israeli attorney and advocate for Palestinians in the West Bank, said the ruling does little to immediately change the lived reality for Palestinians. While ICJ officials read out the ruling on Friday from the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands, Mack received new reports of Israeli settlers attacking Palestinians in the West Bank. The court just said the obvious, Mack told The Intercept. In the West Bank, it's business as usual unless governments have the political will to force both Israelis and Palestinians into implementing a two-state solution that gives Palestine sovereignty. How about one-state solution, just Palestine? Amid the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, Israel began its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and annexed East Jerusalem. Soon after, Israel began to establish settlements inside the occupied territories, supporting Israeli civilians as they built communities atop land taken from Palestinians. While Israel withdrew its troops and settlements from Gaza in 2005, it continued to promote and expand its settlements in the West Bank. And in recent months, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government has used its war in Gaza as a cover to expand its settlements at a rate faster than previous decades. One-state solution, Palestine. The Israeli government immediately dismissed the ICJ ruling, with a defiant Netanyahu calling Jerusalem our eternal capital and referred to the West Bank as the land of our ancestors, using the biblical names Judea and Samaria. No false decision in The Hague will distort this historical truth, he said in a statement, and likewise the legality of Israeli settlement in all the territories of our homeland cannot be contested. B'Tselem, an Israeli-based human rights group, was among a host of organizations that welcomed Friday's ruling after decades of their own advocacy calling for an end to Israel's occupation. They said the international community has been avoiding the issue by buying Israel's claim that its occupation is temporary and that it is engaged in negotiations and diplomacy toward a solution.
Where? When? What? Sorry.
They're not partner for peace. The release of the ICJ's advisory opinion puts an end to these justifications, and now the international community must use every tool, criminal, diplomatic, and economic, to force Israeli decision makers to end the occupation, the group said on Friday. In recent months, more nations have officially recognized Palestine as a state, with Norway, Spain, and Ireland joining 143 other nations in recognition. The ICJ ruling, which declares Israel occupation an obstacle to Palestinian statehood, may embolden more nations to follow suit. In April, the U.S. vetoed a measure in the UN Security Council that would have recognized Palestine as a member of the UN. At the time, the U.S. said Palestinian statehood could only come from direct negotiations between Palestine and Israel. The United States sends billions of dollars of military aid to Israel each year. Israel made similar arguments in the lead-up to the ICJ's decision, stating that the ruling would interfere with ongoing negotiations. Separately, Israel's parliament this week also passed a resolution that rejects Palestinian statehood, calling it an existential danger of the state of Israel and its citizens. Friday's ICJ's decision, Peake noted, undercuts the notion and upholds Palestine's right to self-determination. The ICJ decision, I think, really will give states the legal backing or the legal cover that they need to recognize Palestine, Peake said, and insulate them a little bit from some of the political pressure that would come from the United States and Israel. Peake acknowledged that the UN has made declarations in the past condemning Israeli occupation, but most of those were issued by UN bodies that were organized to specifically address Palestine. A separate ICJ advisory opinion issued in 2004 declared Israel's 400-mile wall in the West Bank illegal. But the UN's top court has never before issued such strong language about the occupation with the backing of the majority of UN membership. I don't think this is going to change everything tomorrow, Peake said. Hopefully what this does do is provide an even stronger set of tools to states and to the international community to try and address some of what is going on in occupied Palestine. This is from The Conversation. Long COVID puzzle pieces are falling into place. The picture is unsettling. Researchers are gaining key insights into the ways that SARS-CoV-2 virus can lead to long COVID symptoms.
Since 2020, the condition known as long COVID-19 has become a widespread disability affecting the health and quality of life of millions of people across the globe and costing economies billions of dollars and reduced productivity of employees and an overall drop in the workforce. The intense scientific effort that long COVID sparked has resulted in more than 24,000 scientific publications, making it the most researched health condition in any 4 years of recorded human history. Long COVID is a term that describes the constellation of long-term health effects caused by the infection with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. These range from persistent respiratory symptoms such as shortness of breath to debilitating fatigue or brain fog that limits people's ability to work, and conditions such as heart failure and diabetes, which are known to last a lifetime. I am a physician scientist, and I have been deeply immersed in studying long COVID since the early days of the pandemic. I have testified before the U.S. Senate as an expert witness on long COVID. I have published extensively on it and was named as one of the Times 100 most influential people in health in 2024 for my research in this area. Over the first half of 2024, a flurry of reports and scientific papers on long COVID added clarity to this complex condition. These include, in particular, insights into how COVID-19 can still wreak havoc on many organs years after the initial viral infection, as well as emerging evidence on viral persistence and immune dysfunction that lasts for months or years after the initial infection. A new study that my colleagues and I published in the New England Journal of Medicine on July 17, 2024, shows that the risk of long COVID declined over the course of the pandemic. In 2020, when the ancestral strain of SARS-CoV-2 was dominant and vaccines were not available, about 10.4% of adults who got COVID-19 developed long COVID. By early 2022, when the Omicron family of variants predominated, that rate declined to 7.7% among unvaccinated adults and 3.5% of vaccinated adults. In other words, unvaccinated people were more than twice as likely to develop long COVID. While researchers like me do not yet have concrete numbers for the current rate in mid-2024 due to the time it takes for long COVID cases to be reflected in the data, the flow of new patients into long COVID clinics has been on par with 2022. We found that the decline was the result of two key drivers. One, the availability of vaccines, and two, the changes in the characteristics of the virus, which made the virus less prone to cause severe acute infections and may have reduced its ability to persist in the human body long enough to cause chronic disease. Despite the decline in risk of developing long COVID, even a 3.5% risk is substantial. New and repeat COVID-19 infections translate into millions of new long COVID cases that add to an already staggering number of people suffering from this condition. Estimates for the first year of the pandemic suggest that at least 65 million people globally have had long COVID. Along with a group of other leading scientists, my team will soon publish updated estimates of the global burden of long COVID and its impact on the global economy through 2023. In addition, a major new report in the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine details all the health effects that constitute long COVID. The report was commissioned by the Social Security Administration to understand the implications of long COVID on its disability benefits. It concludes that long COVID is a complex chronic condition that can result in more than 200 health effects across multiple body systems. These include new onset or worsening heart disease, neurological problems such as cognitive impairment, strokes, and dysautonomia. This is a category of disorders that affect the body's autonomic nervous system, nerves that regulate most of the body's vital mechanisms such as blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature. A state of severe exhaustion that may happen after even minor activity, often leaving the patient unable to function for hours, days, or weeks. Gastrointestinal disorders, kidney disease, metabolic disorders such as diabetes, hyperlipidemia, or a rise in bad cholesterol. Long COVID can affect people across the lifespan from children to older adults and across race and ethnicity and baseline health status. Importantly, more than 90% of people with long COVID had mild COVID-19 infections.
That's fucked up.
That really is. To have very mild,
You have mild symptoms.
Well, we had mild symptoms, and then in the end to turn around and have
lifelong term.
Diabetes from it?
That would be insane.
The National Academy's report also concluded that long COVID can result in the inability to return to work or school, poor quality of life, diminished ability to perform activities of daily living, and decreased physical and cognitive function for months or years after the initial infection. The report points out that many health effects of long COVID, such as chronic fatigue, cognitive impairment, and autonomic dysfunction, are not currently captured in the Social Security Administration's listing of impairments, yet may significantly affect an individual's ability to participate in work or school. Yeah, chronic fatigue is a fucking killer, dude. What's more, health problems resulting from COVID-19 can last years after the initial infection. A large study published in early 2024 showed that even people who had mild SARS-CoV-2 infection still experienced new health problems related to COVID-19 in the third year after the initial infection, which, would probably be hard to find, because if it's 3 years later and it just starts, you're going to be so lost and confused, and thinking that it was COVID would probably not even be anywhere on anyone's mind 3 years later, you know what I mean? Such findings parallel other research showing that the virus persists in various organ systems for months or years after COVID-19 infection. And research is showing that immune responses to the infection are still evident 2 to 3 years after a mild infection. Together, these studies may explain why a SARS-CoV-2 infection years ago could still cause new health problems long after the initial infection. Important progress is also being made in understanding the pathways by which long COVID wreaks havoc on the body. 2 preliminary studies from the US and the Netherlands show that when researchers transfer autoantibodies, antibodies generated by a person's immune system that are directed at their own tissues and organs, from people with long COVID into healthy mice, the animals start to experience long COVID-like symptoms such as muscle weakness and poor balance. These studies suggest that an abnormal immune response thought to be responsible for the generation of these autoantibodies may underlie long COVID, and that removing these autoantibodies may hold promise as potential treatments. Despite overwhelming evidence, I wonder if stem cells would work. Despite overwhelming evidence of the wide-ranging risks of COVID-19, a great deal of messaging suggests that it is no longer a threat to the public. Although there is empirical evidence to back this up, the misinformation has permeated the public narrative. The data, however, tells a different story.
Wear a mask.
COVID-19 infections continue to outnumber flu cases and lead to more hospitalizations and death than the flu. COVID-19 also leads to more serious long-term health problems. Trivializing COVID-19 as an inconsequential cold or equating it with the flu does not align with reality.
The revolution will not be televised. This is from USA Today. This isn't trivial. Applying for welfare benefits is too difficult, low-income Americans say.
Low-income Americans are struggling to obtain help from state governments when they most need it, facing long delays and sometimes insurmountable hurdles when applying for social safety net programs such as food assistance, welfare benefits, Social Security, and health insurance, according to a new report. The findings come as poverty rates, while nowhere near historic highs, have climbed in part because of the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing financial crisis. Social safety nets, such as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, help keep tens of millions of people out of poverty each year, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. But people must provide many personal documents, complete lengthy, confusing applications correctly, prove they're eligible, and regularly update their information. The report from the Urban Institute found most single adults earning up to $51,520, and most families with one child earning up to $87,840 applied for or received a social safety net program in 2021. The report, which is based on a survey in December 2021, analyzed a nationally representative sample of more than 5,000 adults ages 18 to 64, making below 4 times the federal poverty level. Decades-old U.S. poverty level formula makes no sense in 2022. Respondents said they had the most problems enrolling for unemployment insurance, SNAP, and temporary assistance for needy families, known as TANF, or more commonly as welfare benefits. More than 40% of people who applied for or received one of the programs said they had trouble proving eligibility or getting benefits when they needed them. We're not talking about 4 in 10 people reporting difficulty enrolling in their yoga class, said Marla McDaniel, a senior fellow at the Urban Institute and lead author of the report. We're talking about food for their families. This isn't trivial what people are seeking. Social safety net programs are supposed to help eligible people who often face great financial instability. But a high percentage of people who sought benefits told researchers they did not receive help as soon as they needed it. The finding that more than 4 in 10 people who sought help meeting basic needs faced problems is quite disconcerting. The report's other finding, that 55% of surveyed adults sought benefits, shows how much people are hurting, said Luke Schaefer, a leading expert on social safety nets and professor at the University of Michigan. The best indicator we have of whether or not families are struggling to make ends meet is when they seek out help, he said. SNAP and Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, are 2 of the largest government safety nets, according to the report. Among adults surveyed, 39% applied for Medicaid or CHIP, and 29% applied for SNAP in 2021. Medicaid CHIP was associated with lower levels of enrollment problems. They could be because the Affordable Care Act of 2010 and the Children's Health Insurance Program Reauthorization Act of 2009 worked to streamline access and eliminate certain requirements, the report says. In the survey, respondents regularly expressed confusion about why they were denied SNAP dollars. SNAP beneficiaries can also be afraid of making mistakes on their paperwork because providing false income information can result in staggering fines and lengthy jail sentences, according to the report. I won't even apply for food stamps or Medicaid because I'm scared that they may say they overcharge me, said one survey respondent who had to pay back SNAP dollars after being overpaid. You have to pay this back, or we're going to lock you up for this. This is how I feel about them, and it's scary. It's easy for recipients to feel harassed because they have to jump through so many hoops just to get money for basic needs. In a statement to USA Today, the Department of Agriculture said it remains committed to looking for ways to remove barriers to access and make it easier for anyone who qualifies for federal food assistance to get the support they need, regardless of their background. Latino adults were more likely than white and black adults to report enrollment difficulties with Medicaid, CHIP, and SNAP, probably because of language barriers and different eligibility rules for non-citizens, McDaniel said. Yeah, I like how we single out Mexicans, like, oh, you don't belong here, so that's why it's harder for you. Well, maybe we should do something about our citizenship, because if they're here, they're family.
When you're here, you're family.
I'm just saying, like, that sounds like some hardcore, like, racist shit right there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't know how else to say it.
Racism is baked into the American cake.
One way or another. Adults with disabilities were also more likely than those without disabilities to report that Medicaid, CHIP program staff never or only sometimes treated them with courtesy or respect, and to report not getting Medicaid, CHIP benefits as soon as they needed. And that's all basically baked into the cake. They make it harder on purpose. They spread misinformation on purpose. They fearmonger on purpose. So people who need assistance either won't apply or will have so much trouble applying, they give up.
Sorry, personal time.
Yeah, personal time. A week and a half ago, I got injured. Not really sure what's wrong with me still. Went to the doctor, went to the ER, they've done testing, but now the doctor that's supposed to call me back with results, let's just say I'm not going to be speaking to them anytime soon. So in this meantime, I'm not able to work. Not sure if it's able to be even really seen at the moment, but I can't really sit down for long periods of time. It's something wrong with my leg, with my sciatic nerve. I'm not really sure. But that's why we're standing, and that's why we've been standing. And I keep shifting my weight and moving around. And in that meantime, since I've been off work, I am, trying to do, with my work, I have to do FMLA at the meantime, which is unpaid. So I'm trying for some kind of short-term disability until I can figure out what's wrong and go back to work, even if it's shortening my hours, just anything. In getting the short-term disability with my work, there's some paperwork that has to be filled out so that it can be submitted and approved to the company that handles my short-term disability through my work. So I reached out through, my portal, as most people have experience with. You aren't really able to call and speak with your doctor directly. I have heard this a lot, throughout my years. It's just something that people have to use the portal to have contact with their doctor. So using the portal, I did submit the documentation to my doctor. I let them know what's going on. And so they decided to told me they had to schedule me for a phone interview conversation to fill out the paperwork for my disability. I've been off work for about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. My appointment for over the phone is August 2nd.
Rent's due on the 1st.
Rent was due on the 1st.
Rent was due last month. Yeah.
Rent was due July 1st. Rent's due August 1st. Electric's due. A lot of stuff due right now. Reached out to the state because I don't know what else to do. What else do you do? They're supposed to help you, right? So I was able to get SNAP, which is wonderful, but unfortunately, I waited too long or they waited too long, but the card's not going to get here in time. We got approved, but I don't know how to iterate. Like, when you have 2 small children and 2 adults, there's 4 of us in the household, minus, the freaking dog. Is $200, is that even, I'm grateful.
Prices now.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for being approved, but, is that really going to help as much as as much as we really need it?
They haven't updated their numbers for inflation, and they haven't adjusted for the prices of groceries now.
I can't apply for WIC unless I go in and take the kids in. I'm hurt. I can't even sit in a car for extended periods without just being in ungodly pain and just moving and shifting, and I have to get out of the vehicle to stand up, walk around, just anything. So we got SNAP. Yes, I work a full-time job and then some. We have health insurance. We have a high deductible plan. We have a deaf child. We have medical debt. When I went in for one of my testing for my CT scan, while mentioning the insurance and having the high deductible plan, as soon as I walked in the door, they told me that it was going to cost me $2,000 up front just to have a CT scan, just to try to find out what's wrong with me, just so I can go back to work. I'm just trying to go back to work, guys. I'm just trying to go back to work. Understand that. I work 40 hours plus overtime sometimes. I'm literally trying to go back to work. I'm not trying to sit on my ass. Understand this. Understand that people apply for these benefits not because they're trying to sit on their ass. They need fucking help. They approved us for the medical. That's great. I went to go get my prescriptions. They tried to run my medical card, and they said something's wrong with Medicaid because I'm not being brought up in the system as being actively enrolled at this time, and he's coming up as not even being in the system, period. What? Tried to apply for the TANF, the temporary cash assistance, and I turned it down. And the reason that I turned down going further into it, the primary reason, I wanted to delve deeply into my bank account, my personal history, my sexual history, if I'm being abused, if he's being abused, his sexual history. I need to pee in a cup. Am I doing any type of drugs? I'm only doing the drugs you prescribe me. That's the only drugs I've ever done because I try to do everything legally. I'm trying to do everything correctly. I'm trying to get help with my pain. I'm trying to go back to work. I'm trying to get help in the temporary time that I'm off work. And I turned to my family for help. There was conditions with it that are just conditions that are things that I have to think so deeply and long about that I can't give you an answer in a day, in 2 days, in 3 days, but I need your help now. But it's conditional, so all right, I'm not going to rely on you.
Our families have their own problems.
They do. Every family has their own problems, and I do understand that. But if you just said you couldn't help me at this time, that's different than swearing that you would do everything and anything to help me, and then tell me that your love and your help is conditional. It's different if you're like, hey, I can't do that right now. Okay, dude, I get it. I'm struggling. We're all struggling. I get it. If you can't help me right now, you can't help me right now. Just tell me. Just tell me, because I have to figure something out, because we have bills due. They're not due yesterday. They're not due a week from now. Rent was due July 1st. What day is it today? Rent is due August 1st. What am I supposed to do? So, okay, there's a program for renter's assistance through the state. Great. I will apply for renter's assistance. I will apply for the energy assistance, because don't get me started on electric bills, but around here, they just jack up the price because they know that you can't go with anyone else. So
Monopoly.
It's way, way, way overpriced. It's ridiculous.
So is our internet.
Yeah, but I have to have that to work. So there's no choice, which my work also
Dropped as a benefit.
started paying. They initially paid for our internet connection, but then dropped that as a benefit. So now I have to pay for that out of pocket, which also takes away part of my benefits of having to, I used to not have a dress code, but now I have to be on camera occasionally. So now I have to spend money on makeup, on my hair, on my clothes, which understand that.
Hold on. A dress code
for a remote worker.
For a remote worker.
Let's not clarify what I do, just remote worker.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it. I'm just a dress code for remote work.
One of the reasons I went to remote work, also understand that, is because I have, that I know of, fibromyalgia and endometriosis. And if you don't know exactly what those are, let me just summarize this with, I am always tired and I am always in pain. There's some mornings I wake up, I feel like I got hit by a truck, and it's everything I can just to get out of bed. And then all day I'm just struggling with the fatigue and the pain, but I'm there and I'm doing what I have to do, because that's what we all do. We all do what we have to do because we're trying to survive, but I want to live.
Rise and grind.
To go back to the energy assistance and the renter's assistance. So the energy assistance, when I tried to apply for that, it ended on July 14th. And if you check the current date, I did attempt 2 days after the cutoff date. So I can't get any kind of assistance with any of those bills. All right, so rough. Switch to renters. Let's switch to the renters so I can get, I can keep a roof over my kid's head. That's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to keep a roof over our kid's head. As soon as I got in there, it told me that there was no appointments available for this month. So I kept scrolling through it. And when I got to March 2025, I gave up. Because come March 2025, I'm either not going to have a place to live, or I'm already going to have it figured out on my own. And it's not fair because I'm trying everything I can to apply for all these benefits, and I'm getting nothing. March of 2025, I stopped looking. I gave up. Do you understand?
Yeah, that's what they expect you to do. Well, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia for 15 years. The official diagnosis was bipolar type 1 with schizoaffective disorder. I'm what you call a high-functioning schizophrenic. I see things that aren't real. I hear things that aren't real. Mania, paranoia, anxiety. I can't work because I can't trust what I hear or see. It's a degenerative disease, psychosis syndrome. I've been applying for disability since May 2023. I often wonder about two things a lot. One being if I have any value or worth in this society, and two, what kind of privilege someone really has waiting this long on some kind of income to help my family. Amount of support I feel in the amount of time it's taken, and the amount and the treatment that they have, the way they've treated my wife has filled me with rage and hopelessness.
This is from Jacobin. Michael Brooks championed a cosmopolitan socialist vision. The late Michael Brooks championed a vision of international solidarity grounded in our shared humanity. In doing so, he was reviving a tradition of cosmopolitanism that has long animated socialist and working class movements at their best.
Michael Brooks was the rarest thing, a warm and brilliant communicator who combined sweeping intellectual curiosity with a deep moral conviction. I was only able to speak with Michael a few times, but I was immediately struck by how real his interest in other people was. Michael never did that thing where one gets a few stock questions about your life out of the way before moving on to talking about oneself. To talk with him was an experience of two people really getting to know one another, and he made you feel valued by the sincerity of his interest in your opinions and concerns. That is why, in the 3 years since Michael passed away, his loss has never been more keenly felt. Cut down as he was rising to the heights of his powers, Michael had just released his book, Against the Web, responding to the intellectual dark web, which ended with a few of his thoughts about cosmopolitan socialism and what it might mean to his intellectual and spiritual heroes. For Michael, authors like Cornel West and Amartya Sen, and politicians like his beloved Lula da Silva, embodied a kind of cosmopolitan spirit wherein nothing human was foreign to them, and no person who needed help was too far away for them to listen. All this made it intimidating when I was pitched on writing a book on cosmopolitan socialism to build on what Michael had set out to do. On the one hand, it seemed like a reasonable fit. I'd already written a book on international law and cosmopolitanism, and had always wanted to come back to the topic. On the other hand, it was hard to imagine a more humbling request. I wasn't Michael, and I felt it deeply wrong that he'd been denied the time needed to write his own book on the subject. Eventually, with more than a little encouragement from my friend Ben Burgess and Michael's family, I came to feel doing the best job I could was the most respectful tribute I could pay to Mike's legacy. The end result was a how-to guide to cosmopolitan socialism, an attempt to explain some of the history and philosophical rationale underlying the ideals that Michael espoused. The Greek word cosmos can be translated as world or universe, and of course cosmos. Simply put, a cosmopolitan is someone whose community is the world or the entire universe. The philosophical tradition of cosmopolitanism is usually thought to have begun in the Western world with Dionysius the Cynic, who famously declared himself a citizen of the world when he wasn't telling Alexander the Great to slag off. Later, the Stoics also played a crucial role in establishing a new cosmopolitan attitude in sweeping the Roman Empire. The Stoics stressed that though we all may prioritize the families and communities of our birth, our common humanity requires us to broaden the spheres of our concern even wider. Stoics like Seneca also put forward early arguments for the moral equality of all human beings, noting how emperor and slave alike come into the world naked and vulnerable, and leave it by returning to the dust.
Unless you're a pharaoh, and then you just take everybody with you and all your shit.
You mummify yourself. But the ideal of cosmopolitanism has roots outside the West as well. Legend has it that after a particularly great battle, the Mauryan emperor Ashoka ruling in what is now India, expressed horror at the suffering carried out in his name. Converting to Buddhism, Ashoka declared he would fight no more aggressive wars and committed himself to interfaith dialogue and establishing a community of harmony and tolerance.
Why the fuck can't we all do that?
Are you a Buddhist?
So I'm not a Buddhist, but I do think that our world leaders should be disgusted at the atrocities that are carried out in our names and turn to a internal dialogue of peace.
Every world leader should be Buddhist.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it's a requirement. Without a doubt, the most important philosopher of cosmopolitanism was Immanuel Kant. Kant is most famous for his epoch-making work on epistemology and consciousness. The Critique of Pure Reason, along with his pioneering contributions to deontological moral theory in the groundwork to the metaphysics of morals and other works. But Kant was also
It's close to cunt.
But Kant was also actively concerned with the course of world history and was deeply disturbed by never-ending wars and brutalities initiated by authoritarian governments. In essays like Perpetual Peace and Idea for a Universal History with a Cosmopolitan Purpose, Kant called for an end to wars and the peaceful transition of all states to a republican system of government, and developed an early version of refugee rights based on an entitlement to hospitality for those fleeing danger, ideas that he thought were necessary to realize universal human freedom. Despite these merits, Kant's work was flawed. He defended racial stereotypes and at times flirted with excluding non-Europeans from his universalism. Criticisms of Kant have come from other corners too. In the philosophy of right, for instance, J.W.F. Hegel rejected cosmopolitanism in part because he felt its abstract universalism could never substantiate strong ethical commitments to others so far away. The nation-state would have to serve as the political locus of interpersonal loyalties. Karl Marx, in turn, launched a profound critique of Hegel's philosophy of the state as a stepping stone to his own ideas. For Marx, Hegel was right to see history as a process of expanding human freedom through the working out of social tension or conflicts. But the Hegelian reverence for the state showcased the limits of philosophical idealism, which saw history as driven by the development of ideas rather than by material forces and interests. Hegel claimed also that any tensions that emerged in the state must be managed by thought through the pacifying influence of statist religion and philosophy. Marx argued that, in fact, social tensions reflected real conflicts in the material relations of society, and religion and philosophy could at best give expression to those conflicts without resolving them. One potential conflict he observed lay in the tension between bourgeoisie nationalism's necessary role in providing an ideological basis for the emerging state and the imperatives of the emerging capitalist order, which demanded that capitalists supersede the barriers of the nation-state while disrupting local ways of life. In ideal times, the two could coexist harmoniously as they did in the mid-20th century era of strong national welfare states.
You're like, you have to use like the religion of the state. My first thought is thoughts and prayers, guys. Thoughts and prayers. It's so we don't have to help you, but we can turn you to religion so you can pretend like there's something there.
But in other contexts, they could come into conflict, as we've seen recently with nationalists' right-wing backlash against globalization and free trade in the United States, the UK, and across Europe. The problems of capitalism, Marx thought, could only be overcome by the transition to a higher form of society, and he believed the vehicle that would accomplish this was the international working class, which was subject to the domination of capital everywhere and needed to fight against it globally. This was the hope embodied in slogans like Workers of the World Unite. But importantly for Marx, socialism wouldn't entail the replacement of one form of group domination by another. Instead, class hierarchies would be eliminated, with the free development of each becoming a condition for the free development of all, and human flourishing becoming an end in itself for the first time. In no small part because of Marx's influence, socialists throughout the 19th and 20th centuries have often acknowledged the cosmopolitan sweep of their ambitions. After all, workers are exploited the world over. But this cosmopolitan orientation ran into severe challenges, ranging from the support of many socialist parties for nationalist militarism in World War I to the authoritarian degeneration of socialism in the Soviet Union and other purportedly socialist states. I mean, that's just CIA disinformation, really.
What? CIA lied to the people?
Some of these challenges were due to the tremendous barriers to successful international organization, not those imposed by reactionary forces. but some of it emerged from the more general fact that, in the absence of worldwide revolution, the most admirable forms of social democratic and socialist organization were constructed at the level of the nation-state. The Nordic forms of social democracy in the West and many socialist, anti-colonial, and anti-imperialist movements in the global South are emblematic in different ways. Efforts were made by organizations like the Socialist International to organize social democratic states and parties into a more global movement, but none of these ever achieved the influence of capitalist financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, in no small part due to the lack of powerful imperial backer like the United States. Despite this, the goal of a truly cosmopolitan socialism is a worthy one, as Michael Brooks well understood. In Against the Web, he acknowledged that many on the left might be skeptical for a variety of reasons. Some might look at existing antagonisms of interest between the ruling and exploiting classes and imagine that achieving a harmonious, equal society is impossible. I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
Kids, I don't know how to tell you this, but the wealthy's not just going to hand their assets over. Others might argue that there are profound divisions between people of different cultures, genders, sexual orientations, and races, differences that might be so profound as to doom efforts to unite people around a universalistic socialist project. Michael was sensitive to these worries and acknowledged that socialists could not dismiss fights against non-class forms of oppression as less morally important than the global struggle against capitalism. With Nancy Fraser and other socialist feminists, he understood that there was no disconnecting the struggle against capitalist domination by capital from fights for gender and racial inequality. But Michael also believed we could achieve unity out of these differences, in part by celebrating human variety. He loved to point out that human beings of all kinds have constantly been in dialogue with and learning from one another, and that many of the differences we drew between ourselves and others look less significant when you step back and survey our shared histories of human life.
We all bleed red.
Ruminating on the ancient Western tradition, Michael reminded us that it was in fact highly geographical and intellectually diverse, and included African and Pan-Asian sources that are misleading remembered as Greek or Roman. He thought that people should strive to emulate the curiosity and rigor of the Christian revolutionary intellectual Cornel West, who explores the echoes between Anton Chekhov and the blues with no interest in drawing artificial lines between cultures. Finding insight and even joy in these forms of unity from diversity is fundamental to the ethos of cosmopolitan socialism at its best. I follow my late comrade Michael in thinking we need to embrace the spirit and ethos by recovering the humanist universalism of Brooks, West, and Sen, and others. Taking seriously the cosmopolitan mantra that nothing human is foreign to us means pushing it to the conclusion that struggles against domination in one part of the world mean as much as struggles in another.